the federal government and the bureaucrats behind it, they love the federal emergencies that they can declare, because then the laws go out the window and it's whatever they say you have to do. The legal challenges are very different as well. And this time around, it is a federal public health emergency declaration on abortion. They want to declare through Javier Becerra and HHS an abortion public health emergency that would free up resources, that would mean your taxpayer dollars, to help people access abortions. Now, there's a huge problem with that already, and is this just politics? Because there is the Hyde Amendment. The Hyde Amendment prevents federal dollars and taxpayer dollars from actually going to pay for abortions. Now, Planned Parenthood has that setup where the accounting setup where they say the money that we get from the federal government we don't utilize for abortions. But the federal government coming right out and saying this is for abortions, they say somehow that they're going to make it easier to travel. So if you're in a state with a lot of abortion restrictions, they're going to make it easier. I don't know how under federal law, with the Hyde Amendment in place, you could possibly say you could pay for someone to go get an abortion. That's not paying for the abortion. I mean, that again, this is going to be something you have to stop in court. And we think it's something that we could get potentially stopped before it's even started.
I think you can get a preliminary injunction. And here's the reason why. The Hyde Amendment, which has been around for now 30 years, specifically states that you cannot use federal funds for accessing abortion. That would include funds from the federal government given to the states to be used for travel for people to go to states that have abortion laws, so they call it destination abortion travel. That would be a violation of the Hyde Amendment. So I think what you do, and I think we're looking at this already, is prepare to go to federal court, because what you can do is get what's called an injunction, like a temporary restraining order, but here you'd want it to go more than 14 days. TROs are only good for 14 days. A preliminary injunction could go on for months. Get a preliminary injunction, then get declaratory relief. What declaratory relief means, you get an injunction in place saying you can't use the federal funds to give to the states for this abortion activity, and then the declaratory judgment comes in and says, we declare that what the federal government is proposing here or is doing is in fact unconstitutional or violates statutes. And here it would be a statutory violation. So that's how we're going to handle it. But it's interesting that they're seeking an emergency, because they will also, I guarantee you, they will start regulating even further the pro-life resource centers, of which we've got our team working with them from coast to coast right now, because they're already being regulated or attempting to be regulated out of business.
Yeah, I think, again, this is something you have to – this is where the Biden administration wants to go, though. Declare an emergency to kill unborn children, because it's not easy enough right now in the United States or in some states. And so they want to make it easier for abortion travel. We've seen some states do this. California's talked about doing this, but they're not bound by the Hyde Amendment the same way. So their state funding would not be – and their state taxpayer dollars would not be bound by the same federal restrictions that are in place. So, again, it shows they're doubling down on this issue because politically they think this was a winning issue
they do.
In the midterms. And I think they were probably right.
Yep.
Because of the way that they cast it, which was not, we're going to sit around people to pay for abortions. It was, if you have a miscarriage, you're going to have an investigation because are you responsible for the miscarriage somehow?
Yep.
There's a lot of bad misinformation, but they also embrace this idea that they're not trying to say it's not a life anymore.
No, it's interesting.
Or
also,
it's not a human.
The federal government's overreaching on the abortion issue. We're going to talk coming up an acquittal on a pro-life protesters case involving the Free Access to Clinic Entrances Act in a jury trial, and he was acquitted. So we want to talk about that. But this is where and they brought in their lead face Free Access to Clinic Entrance Act litigator to do it. By the way, we're going to use the Free Access to Clinic Entrances Act to protect pro-life resource centers, crisis pregnancy centers, and we've got a case being worked on right now.
A high-profile move. The Department of Justice decided after local prosecutors and a DA to go after a pro-life sidewalk counselor. Remember, this was in Pennsylvania. And what this incident was that the sidewalk counselor got into a verbal dispute with a clinic employee. There was no one being taken to the abortion clinic. So this clinic employee, and they call them escorts, goes up to this pro-life sidewalk counselor. He's got his child with him, starts cursing at me using really horrendous language in front of the kid. There's like a little scuffle, small scuffle. So small that the local DA say, we're not taking this to court. This is like a pushing and shoving thing with two adults. But who decides to take it to court under federal? This is a federal law of federal violation. Merrick Garland made a big deal about this.
Oh yeah,
we're not going to accept this. We're not going to allow this kind of behavior. But they had to go before a jury, and the jury knew it was a pushing and shoving, and a guy's son getting cursed out. And people put themselves in the shoes. They always say, do that. If you put yourself in those shoes, your kid is getting cursed out, you might shove someone.
Well, here's what happened. I mean, first of all, the Free Access to Clinic Entrance Act was designed to stop mass protests blockading access to abortion facilities. That's what it was designed to do. We litigated those. There was questions of whether it was constitutional under the Commerce Clause. Then it went dormant for a long time. I mean, I would say probably 2 decades. You barely heard about it. And then all of a sudden, the Biden administration, resurrects the statute and starts using it. So they hit multiple cases. You had Pennsylvania, you had Tennessee, other cases, I think, outside of D.C. And they brought in a free access to clinic entrances DOJ team to deal with this. That's how serious they took this in their fight to preserve abortion.
Yeah, and what Jordan pointed out, and it's true, is that the local government was involved in this case, which happened several years ago. It wasn't just recent. And so, when this whole scuffle happened, the police were called. They didn't find any assault or battery charges. I think the escort actually filed a court case, and that case got thrown out locally. And
the escort didn't even show up to prosecute.
Right. And so now, after a year and a half has passed, then the federal government comes in and says, well, we're going to go after this guy, and we're going to send our FBI agents all armed, with their guns pulled to his house to arrest him. And thankfully, when the jury heard this, case and actually the facts, they realized he did not commit any crime or violate the FACE Act.
So what we're doing also, we've got a series of cases representing crisis pregnancy centers, both on regulatory issues where they're trying to be regulated out of existence, but also where they've had damage by Jane's Revenge and groups affiliated with Jane's Revenge. We did have a meeting with the FBI. Our lawyers were present in that meeting, participated, and now it looks like that particular pregnancy resource center, I don't want to go into great details of it right now, but I think we're going to be filing a suit utilizing the Free Access to Clinic Entrances Act to go after these pro-abortion groups that are trying to destroy these facilities.
Yeah, and I think this is key because, again, we have to, I think as a movement, determine now, we've overturned Roe versus Wade. The battle's now in the states, and when you take those battles into the states, you've got a big business fighting for survival in the abortion industry. They've got a lot of resources still available to them, billions of dollars a year. We got to fight back. And you have to fight back whether it's utilizing their own laws against them, whether it is saying, you know what, this time we are going to actually file a lawsuit. And we've seen a change in that amongst pro-life groups. And we're the attorneys, but these like pregnancy centers, and they're on the front line, literally. Because if the Biden administration declares this health emergency, right, even if it only lasts for a few weeks and it gets stopped in court, who do you think that they're going to target as the bad guys? The bad guys in this are the pregnancy centers.
Yeah, exactly.
They will be violating some kind of public health. So they'll treat them as if they are the mis and disinformation, which we already know they do, but under some kind of federal emergency, which who knows what they'll try to do under that.
Right.
Because every time they say, like, for instance, and we were talking about this with Jim Jordan, the school board issue, and that issue, when the DOJ said, okay, we're going to cooperate with with Jim Jordan's committee on this, they didn't say to protect the rights of parents. You know what they said? To protect the teachers.
The teachers and the teachers' unions.
Right, that's who they want to protect.
The Biden administration has made a conscientious decision to go after crisis pregnancy centers, to go after pro-life protesters, and it was a lot of pressure we put on them to get at least investigations on this activity that was going against what we're calling the pregnancy resource centers. And what's interesting in all of this is that the government had to come to this kind of kicking and screaming, although they had to acknowledge that most of the violence is against the pregnancy resource centers.
Yeah, that was what was so ridiculous, is they had publicly acknowledged that it was the pregnancy resource centers that were getting the attacks and actually having these FACE Act violations. And yet they were not going after any of the Jane's Revenge people that had attacked these pregnancy resource centers at all. Yeah, and so now we're seeing that.
We got to also say, Jane's Revenge operates in the shadows.
Yes, they do try to operate in the shadows, and they try to be this just generic group that kind of pops up everywhere. But you can find out who these people are.
Yep.
It was an actual individual that came and firebombed, one of these pregnancy centers. So you can find out who these people are, and we've seen that now they actually are doing that the DOJ has gone after some people in Florida. And then, as you said, we have a case also. So hopefully the tide will turn, and hopefully they've gotten the message, even with this case in Pennsylvania, that they're not the juries aren't going to find these people guilty.
But Jordan, if they declare a health emergency, which is what they're planning on doing, a health emergency on abortion, it's going to be nefarious. They're going to be up to no good. I mean, whether it's going to be however they're going to utilize it, it's not going to be good.
No, I don't think it'll just be trying to divert resources. I think it'll be trying to go after pro-life speech. So anything because if you declare that this is an emergency and some kind of top issue, I mean, treat it like COVID, right? Remember how they went after speech like that? You were kicked off social media accounts. You were shut down just by anytime you question the government, even just questioning. You could be totally deplatformed. And we know, unfortunately, when it comes to the abortion issue, big business is behind Planned Parenthood. Look who funds Planned Parenthood. It's all of their nonprofits. I mean, some of the biggest nonprofits in the United States, biggest foundations in the United States fund Planned Parenthood. They all have major corporate ties. So they would have no problem, again, if they could, under a federal rules, kicking you off, deplatforming you, you're saying you can't get ads, you can't get ad rep, all those things for being pro-life. And so I see the bigger nefarious issue is not paying for someone's travel to get an abortion. It's going to be trying to shut down pro-life speech.
I think it's fair to say that they will try to shut down pro-life messages. I don't see that as a stretch at all.
No, and in fact, the statement that they made is, we are constantly exploring additional actions we can take to protect and expand access to reproductive health care, including abortion care, and are prioritizing the actions that can give us the highest impact and most durable solutions. And that would absolutely be going after the pro-life pregnancy resource centers. So they're saying it, even though they're not coming out and saying it explicitly, they're saying it in what they're trying to do, expanding and protecting. They will hit the pregnancy resource centers.
So it's going to be multifaceted. So you're going to have we're going to go after the speech. So we're going to stop the speaker on the street because we're going to use the most intimidating tactic we can. The Free Access to Clinic Entrances Act criminal provisions, which make it a felony. We're going to go to people's houses. We're going to go in there with SWAT teams. We're going to go in with those SWAT teams with our guns in front of your kids, and we're going to say, you're under arrest for violating federal law, and you're going to go to jail for 11 years. That's one way to do it, okay? The second way to do it is take the people on the front lines, crisis pregnancy centers, pregnancy resource centers, and say to them, you're engaged in fraudulent and deceptive trade practices. We're going to now regulate you. And in California, they try to regulate them out of existence. We won that at the Supreme Court of the United States, by the way. Then you're going to have the pro-life speaker, like Jordan said, whether it's the sidewalk counselor, whatever activity they're involved in. And that's going to become subject to, additional legal action. We've already seen it. We're going to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Third Circuit on that case. We just won one at the Sixth Circuit. So all of these cases are coming simultaneously. So it is an attack on life, and what we have to do is respond, but also be aggressive, not wait to just be responsive here. And that's why we're about to take major action on a major case we're about to file. You can't just wait and take it. You've got to initiate proceedings as well. Yeah,
and I think you've seen this even defending this gentleman in Pennsylvania. Hopefully the fact that the jury said absolutely not guilty, that sends a message to the DOJ and the Biden administration that their plan to attack pro-life people, pro-life centers is going to backfire on them. And you only accomplish that by taking action and standing up and defending them.
If you like the work of the American Center for Law and Justice, or you find this broadcast helpful to you, it stays on the air because of your support. And we want to encourage you to do that today at aclj.org. Donate to the work of the ACLJ. That includes the litigation, but there's a lot of you watching this broadcast right now, and hundreds of thousands of you listening to this broadcast right now. Support our work, which keeps this on the air on your station, on the social media platforms, wherever you're finding it. And I encourage you to do that. Go to aclj.org. And also, follow us on social media as well. You do that at Jordan Sekulow, at Jay Sekulow, at Logan Sekulow, at ACLJ. Great way to stay engaged with us.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. Let's go to Stanley in California on line 1. Hey, Stanley.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I wonder if this is not a good possibility for your organization to file a suit for malicious prosecution in case regarding Mr. Houck in Pennsylvania. It seems that to me there was an outlandish case, the way he was treated, and totally maliciously, and I wonder if you could handle that.
Well, it's interesting you say that because malicious prosecution cases are very difficult. The burden of proof that you'd have to establish in the civil case to get a jury verdict would be very difficult. And remember this, it was not like nothing happened there. So I would say if there was no altercation, it would be a stronger case for malicious prosecution. But there was an altercation. Now, Mr. Houck said he was protecting his son, and evidently the jury agreed. And that's why he was acquitted. So I think the victory here is the acquittal. Now, like I said, we're taking the Free Access to Clinic Entrances Act, and we're going to utilize it for pro-life resource centers that have been targeted by groups like Jane's Revenge, because in the description under FACE, it doesn't say abortion facilities, it says reproductive facilities.
Right, reproductive health care, which
Includes.
crisis pregnancy centers,
Yep.
Pregnancy resource centers do fall under that definition. And of course, it's never been used for that before. It's always been used to protect abortion clinics. But these pregnancy resource centers are covered. And what happened after the Dobbs leak, all these centers being attacked, being firebombed, being vandalized, being threatened, those all fall under this act. And so there are prosecutions and ways to go after Jane's Revenge and the perpetrators of those acts.
And Stan, so you know, we're doing that. I mean, we're getting ready to, we're working on filing one right now as we speak. Jordan, interesting issue, and that was Gallup, which is a very respected polling agency, said, what's the most important problems facing the country today? And their answer was?
Leadership. So it wasn't the economy, wasn't number one, but it was that basically that everything is being managed poorly. And so what's interesting is inflation was number one for most of the past year. But 21% of Americans said that, and then it was 15% who said so last year. So it's gone up. So the fact is, people, I think, say, wait, is it really just inflation, or is it just this is all being managed poorly, which is why we have inflation, why we have war in Europe, why we have all these issues is it starts with the leadership. It's not just one-offs. So I think that it's probably all of those things combined. It's that we're still talking about where are we economically.
Yes.
And we don't really get a clear indication of, are we coming out of this? Are we back into this? They just announced today they're going to end the COVID emergency in May. So that's a long time still.
5 months.
And so they're going to come up with another emergency, which we talked about already, which was abortion. So they don't really want to give up those emergency powers.
It's interesting. They wanted
that also affects immigration.
They want to get. Yeah, I was going to say they want to get rid of the COVID restrictions in May, which makes sense. And then at the same time, they're saying they're not going to apply Title 42 on the border because the COVID pandemic is over. I mean, this is where the lack of trust. Well, let me give you another little lack of trust. It's not getting as much attention as it normally would, although I suspect it will be in the next 24 hours. The FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, went into the office of the now President of the United States, then President-elect of the United States. Well, actually, he was President of the United States at the time. It was November of this past year. And searched his office for classified documents. This has never been disclosed. It was about the same week that Merrick Garland appointed the special counsel against Donald Trump. This is where the lack of government transparency, and that's why we've got a FOIA request to the National Archives under expedited review right now.
Yeah, so remember it was, we found out that it was a week before the midterm election, November 2nd, when Joe Biden's private attorneys notified the FBI they had found these 10 documents at the Penn Biden Center. Now we know that about, they said mid-November, so I mean, days after that,
right,
the FBI was in that office looking for more classified documents. So that the first time the FBI went to a Joe Biden property was not his home in Wilmington last month. It was, this month. It was, they went way back in November and still decided to appoint a special counsel against Donald Trump. This is when Merrick Garland leadership questions. We put a weak attorney general, it ends up backfiring on you, and it can backfire on Joe Biden. Because there he goes. Knowing this information, he said, let's do a special counsel on Trump, which means he knew he was going to have to appoint one eventually on Biden.
Of course. Of course. So my friends on the left, this is what you put in the Department of Justice. This is what you get. But here's what's also fascinating about this. And this puts the White House spokesperson, Karine Jean-Pierre, I feel, listen, she's in a very tough spot. You cannot blame her, okay? That's not fair. You got to blame the top. You've had the FBI execute a search warrant on a former president's house. The FBI now in the house and office of the current president of the United States, and the FBI in the vice president's house, the former vice president's house, looking for documents. Now, think about this for a moment. Lack of leadership. But then you put in place a mechanism with the special counsel, and, getting that cat back in the is not easy, and getting that toothpaste back in the tube doesn't happen. The cat doesn't go back in the bag, and the
right.
toothpaste doesn't go back in the tube. I mean, this is, they unleashed a whirlwind,
right.
To quote Chuck Schumer, and they're having to pay for it.
That's right. And the White House not even admitting, like you're saying, lack of leadership and transparency. When the FBI went into Biden's house, that was the first time the American people thought the FBI had gone anywhere. But now we're just learning. Now we're learning, oh, no, the FBI actually went back in November at the Penn Biden Center. And so, again, lack of leadership.
Later
lack of leadership, lack of transparency. The American people do not trust this administration.
And, Jordan, remember this also, and this is important to remember. It was Friday that it was acknowledged that if the lawyers representing President Biden did not agree to the search of his home, they were getting a search warrant.
Yeah, they were going to do the raid.
Yes.
I mean, and so... Again, we now know that Joe Biden has been going back and forth on this. I mean, since the first week of November, he's had the FBI going through his document. We talk about how unprecedented this is, that you have the FBI going through the homes of the former president, the current president, the former, I would guess, Mike Pence. That's happening fairly soon,
sure.
if it hasn't happened already. So the former vice president, and then announcing from National Archives that we may go after Obama and Bush. When you create this,
Carter, all the way back.
When you create this bureaucracy that is insane, these Jim Comey type individuals who think they're the god, that think they're the actual leaders, not the elected officials of the United States. This is what you get. This is why we said the bureaucracy is out of control, that the deep state became forward-facing under Trump. They said they came out of the shadows, if you will, to reassert their authority. We've seen this throughout our history before, where the FBI has been out of control. And we've had these leaders that are way too powerful. They're unelected. That's where I get to the issues. These are not elected.
Unelected bureaucrats controlling our federal government. But here's the thing I wanted to say. In the last segment, we were talking about the life issue, and I told you the ACLJ is filing a lawsuit on that one. And we won on the cases at the Supreme Court of the United States involving the attempts to regulate out these crisis pregnancy centers. On this one, we've already sent the FOIA requests into the National Archives and have received and are receiving expedited review. So there you go. Do we have to eventually go to court on that? Maybe. But I'm just saying, on both of these issues, the ACLJ is there. Support the work of the ACLJ. Also, if you enjoy this broadcast,